This is the real-life story of the most powerful mafia family in America. This is the real-life story of the most powerful mafia family in America. This is why they hate each other so much. Growing up in the projects of Brooklyn, New York, in the early 1900s, there was one rule that Carlo Gambino had to live by. That meant two things. His dad wasn't coming back anytime soon, if ever, and the family needed money. The American Mafia is also known as the Italian-American Mafia, or La Cosa Nostra, which translates to our thing. At the age of 16, he met a local mobster named Albert Anastasia, who took him under his wing and taught him the ways of the Mafia. He continued to climb the ranks and eventually became the Capo Regime, or head of the Gambino crime family. As soon as Carlo took over the Gambino family, he set his sights on expanding its territory. Under his leadership, the family grew exponentially and became the most powerful of the five. They also formed strong ties with the other families and kept a close eye on the government. Carlo knew that the feds were watching him closely, and he was about to let them arrest him without a fight. In order to stay one step ahead of the authorities, he developed a new strategy for the family. Instead of sticking to traditional racketeering and extortion schemes, Carlo diversified and expanded into new areas such as gambling, drug trafficking, and even legitimate businesses. He also created a new position within the organization, the consigliere, whose sole responsibility was to keep tabs on the government and make sure they didn't make any moves against the family. With these changes in place, the Gambino family flourished under Carlo's leadership. He was able to maintain control while staying one step ahead of the authorities. When he died of a heart attack in 1976, he left behind a legacy that would live on for generations. Now that he was in charge, Carlo could finally start planning his revenge against those who had betrayed his mentor. Under his leadership, the Gambino family continued to thrive. However, not everyone was happy with Carlito's rise to power. One of his rivals, Anthony "Fat Tony" Salerno, was furious that Carlito had taken over the family, and he wanted revenge. Fat Tony was a made man in the Lucchese crime family, and he had been passed over for the boss position when his boss was arrested. He saw Carlito as a threat, and he was determined to take him down. To make matters worse, Carlito had made enemies with the government. He had been involved in several high-profile cases, and the feds were eager to put him away. They'd been watching him for years, and they were ready to make their move. When the time was right, both Fat Tony and the feds had the perfect opportunity to take down Carlito. In 1986, a grand jury indicted over 40 members of the Mafia, including several high-ranking members of the Gambino family. The charges ranged from racketeering to murder, and the stakes couldn't be higher. For the first time in history, the government was going after the Mafia with the full force. This case became known as the Mafia Commission Trial, and it would change the course of organized crime forever. The government had gathered so much evidence against the mobsters that it was clear they had no choice but to go along with it. Many of them were arrested and sent to prison, where they would spend the rest of their lives. Others were forced to turn rat and testify against their former colleagues. Among them was Sammy the Bull Gravano, who became one of the most important witnesses in the government's case against the Mafia. He began by reaching out to the other families and forming alliances. He knew he couldn't take on the other bosses alone, but with a little help from his friends, he just might stand a chance. With his allies in place, Carlo made his move. He targeted the underbosses and consigliere of the other families, eliminating them one by one until only Castellano was left standing. With the other bosses out of the picture, Carlo turned his attention to Castellano. He knew that the other families wouldn't stand for this, but he didn't care. He'd come too far to turn back now. A brutal war erupted between the families, and it was unlike anything they had ever seen before. Machine guns were set up in the streets, snipers took positions on rooftops, and bombs were planted in cars. It was every man for himself, and only the strongest would survive. In the end, it was Carlo who came out on top. He had eliminated all of his enemies, and now he was the undisputed boss of the Mafia, with Anastasia's help. Carlo climbed the ranks quickly, and by the time World War II rolled around, he was a full-fledged soldier in Anastasia's crew. During the war, Carlo served in the U.S. Army and saw his fair share of combat. But when he returned home, he was greeted by news that Anastasia had been killed. With Anastasia gone, the five families were thrown into chaos, and the other mobsters were quick to take advantage. One of them was Frank Castellano, who had always been jealous of Anastasia's power and influence. Castellano seized this opportunity and declared war on the Anastasia family. The other families quickly took sides, and before long, the streets of New York were filled with violence as the different crews battled for supremacy. In the end, it was Castellano's crew that came out on top, and they wasted no time in sending a message to the other families. They weren't going to tolerate any dissent, and anyone who went against them would be dealt with swiftly and brutally. This message was received loud and clear, and for the next several years there was peace among the families. But it was only a matter of time before the violence started again. It's not a huge organization in terms of numbers, but its influence is vast. The Mafia is organized into 5 main families: the Bonanno crime family, the Colombo crime family, the Gambino crime family, the Genovese crime family, and the Lucchese crime family. Each family is ruled by a commission made up of the heads of all the different families. And at the top of the pyramid is the boss. Underneath the boss are the Underboss and the Consigliere. Both advise the boss and help run the day-to-day operations. Below them are the captains, who oversee a group of soldiers. And at the very bottom are the associates, who can either work their way up through the ranks or get whacked. If the police find out who they're working for, becoming a member is no easy feat. Not only do you have to earn the respect of everyone in the organization, but you also need to be willing to do whatever it takes to keep the family's secrets. And if that means taking someone out, then so be it. That's why many members are known to wear a special ring on their right index finger. The ring has a red stone in the center, surrounded by smaller stones on each side. If the Mafia man ever finds himself in a tight spot, he can take off the ring and use the smaller stones as shikomi zugashira, or hidden blades. So young Carlo took it upon himself to join the local street gang, earning enough cash to keep them afloat. Little did he know, this would be the first step towards taking over the American Mafia. You never talk about your family's business. Of course, at the age of 4, little Carlito didn't really know what his father did for a living. All he knew was that the man smelled like stale cigarettes and cheap cologne, and often came home with colorful stories and an empty bottle of liquor in his pocket. But when the police showed up in the middle of the night and took his father away, that's when young Carlo started to figure it out. By the time he turned 12, Carlo knew his father was a made man. But before we get into how Carlo took down his enemies and became a Mafia kingpin, let's explain how the American Mafia actually works. Now let's get back to the story. While Carlo was making money for his family on the streets, he also got involved with some dangerous people. In the meantime, Carlo married a woman named Sylvia, and together they had 4 children. But the victory was short-lived, because this was only the beginning. After Carlo's death, his son, Carlito Jr., took over the family business. And that's where we'll pick up next time with the last of the Mafia kings. See you next time.